All right, let's jump right in. In this explainer, we're going to tackle a really critical compliance question for universities and their foundations. Is charitable solicitation registration required? Let's find out. This explainer is all about breaking down a pretty complex fundraising topic into practical, easy-to-understand terms for nonprofit leaders and their finance teams. It's a resource provided by Ironwood Registrations. You know, a lot of universities don't actually handle their own fundraising directly. Instead, they often use affiliated nonprofit foundations to manage the whole shebang, from alumni giving and big capital campaigns to growing endowments. And this common setup leads to a huge compliance question that, honestly, many leaders can overlook. Do these foundations need to register for charitable solicitation in every single state where they're trying to raise money?
And this is exactly where it gets tricky. The rules aren't the same for both. While the university itself might get a pass and qualify for an exemption, its foundation, well, it's often playing by a completely different set of rules.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with the foundation model and why universities get exemptions. Then we'll dive into foundation compliance, some partial exemptions, and the complexities of nationwide fundraising. We'll wrap up by explaining why your legal structure is the most important piece of this puzzle. First up, let's explore this foundation model, just so we're all on the same page about how these organizations work. So, many colleges and universities set up these separate 501c3 public charities specifically to manage their fundraising. You'll hear them called all sorts of things: university foundations, educational foundations, alumni foundations, you name it. But at their core, they all exist for one reason: to support the educational institution through fundraising. Okay, so what about the universities themselves? Let's turn to university exemptions and look at why the institution often gets to skip the registration process. The reason states often grant these exemptions is pretty logical. Universities are already under a ton of regulatory oversight from accreditation bodies, state agencies, and federal reporting requirements. But, and this is a really big but, these exemptions almost always apply only to the institution itself. That special status doesn't just automatically transfer over to any other affiliated organization. And that brings us right to the heart of the issue: foundation compliance. Let's unpack why these organizations are viewed so differently in the eyes of regulators.
The most important point to remember is this: educational foundations are almost always separate legal entities from the university. As far as the law is concerned, they are a completely distinct organization.
And the result of that legal separation is huge. It means that foundations often have to comply with the very same registration requirements as any other nonprofit. If they're asking for donations in a state, they probably need to register there.
Now, it's not always quite that simple. Some states do offer a bit of a middle ground, which brings us to partial exemptions.
Some states might grant a limited or conditional exemption, but only if the foundation meets some very specific criteria. For example, the foundation might have to exist solely to support that one institution, the university has to exercise some control over it, and the fundraising needs to be aimed mostly at alumni.
And here's another important detail to remember. Even when a foundation qualifies for an exemption, the work isn't done. Some states still require you to file an exemption notice. You can't just assume you're compliant. You've got to check the rules really carefully.
Okay, let's move on to nationwide fundraising. This is where we see how fundraising across state lines adds a whole other layer of complexity. I mean, think about it. University foundations are ambitious. They're running massive alumni initiatives, huge capital campaigns, and they have those Donate Now buttons on their websites. This kind of nationwide outreach means they're soliciting donations from people all over the country. And because all these charitable solicitation laws are governed at the state level, nationwide fundraising creates this incredibly complex patchwork of obligations. An exemption in your home state gives you zero protection in another state that requires registration.
This brings us to our final and most critical point: structure is key. Let's look at why your legal setup is truly the single most important factor in all of this.
When regulators are trying to decide if registration is needed, they're focused on one very simple question: which legal entity is actually doing the fundraising? Is it the university, or is it the legally separate foundation? So the main takeaway is this: because affiliated foundations are treated as independent organizations, they are very often required to register wherever they solicit donations, no matter what the university's own exempt status is.
At the end of the day, really understanding how these laws apply is essential. It ensures all your fundraising activities stay compliant, which is what protects and supports the long-term mission of the institution you serve. We hope this explainer helped bring some clarity to a pretty confusing topic. This has been a resource from Ironwood Registrations.